So anyone who says, oh, you're doing identity politics, even people, even conservatives, well, this is identity politics. We need to be past this. Oh, shut up. Yesterday was the single most clarifying day in American politics since the election of Donald Trump in 2016. Now, when I say clarifying, I don't mean that it was the most consequential day or most important day in American politics. There have been plenty of days that were far more important in terms of their raw impact on millions of people over the last decade or so. But no day has been anywhere near as illuminating as this one in recent years. No one day has done a better job of showing us where the battle lines are, what's important and what's not, at a time when pretty much every prominent commentator and politician on the right is picking a wildly different target. No less than 2 months ago, one of the leading Republicans in the Senate, a man I respect, was going after the President of the United States for not reading To Kill a Mockingbird. Hasn't the president heard of the fictional character Atticus Finch, asked Senator Rand Paul as the Pentagon sent drug traffickers to the bottom of the ocean? Meanwhile, some conservatives, including some well-known ones, have been obsessively attacking me, in some cases calling for my termination because I've called for unity on the right in the face of our common enemies on the left. And of course, over the last few weeks, most prominently, we've watched the right-wing commentariat rip each other to shreds over offensive group chats and podcast guests and so on. Well, congratulations. While conservatives have been arguing with one another and administering purity tests to determine who's a legitimate part of the movement and who's not, a unified Democrat Party just elected an attorney general who openly fantasizes about murdering us, watching our children die in our arms. Less than 2 months after Charlie Kirk was shot to death in front of the entire world, Democrat voters backed a candidate who wants more conservatives to die because of their political views. They also elected as governor a demented CIA operative who grins when she's asked about her support for this attorney general live on the debate stage. Additionally, Democrats flipped something like 10 seats in the Virginia House, ensuring that these two sociopaths at the top of the ticket can do whatever they want once they take office. And we know what Jay Jones wants to do. He's told us. In fact, every single county in the state of Virginia, even the ones that ultimately went Republican, shifted heavily towards Democrats last night. You can see those results on the screen right now. This was a total blowout in the state of Virginia, which is home to more than 1 million immigrants concentrated in the north and hundreds of thousands of government employees who are concentrated in the south. Those are people who are furious that their government salaries, which are really a form of welfare in most cases, aren't being paid out due to the government shutdown. And now they're making it clear that if conservatives don't want to pay them, then conservatives deserve to die, basically. And meanwhile, as Republicans feuded relentlessly with one another, Democrats also elected a Muslim socialist from Uganda for the explicit purpose of destroying the nerve center of American capitalism. You'll get your government-run grocery stores and your free buses open to every vagrant and schizophrenic in the city, says Zohran Mamdani. But of course, you also have to pay for all of these free perks in the form of higher taxes. And you won't find Mamdani riding on one of those buses or standing in any of the bread lines without armed guards, because despite what his platform might suggest, he's not anywhere near as stupid as he looks. So what happens when New York runs out of people to tax? What happens when they all flee to Florida? What happens when free buses means that no one can ride the bus anymore because it's not safe? Mamdani and everyone else in the Democrat Party, they know the answer to these questions. The answer is that New York will transform into Uganda. Now, ask any conservative and they'll describe that outcome as a failure. But Democrats don't see it that way. And neither do their voters. And here's why. Imagine for a moment that you live in Kenya. And like most Kenyans, you make about $1,000 per year. Yes, $1,000 per year. And then imagine that, like most Kenyans, you don't even have access to clean drinking water, much less reliable social services. And that's what you're used to. And then imagine that one member of your family manages to get to America. They fake an asylum claim and move into an apartment in New York where they don't pay any rent thanks to some pro bono legal services offered by a nonprofit or a law firm. What do you think their top priority is going to be? Now, well, obviously, they're going to look after their family back home. And their home is Kenya. They're going to collect welfare from the U.S. taxpayer, mail it to their relatives overseas. And they're going to support whatever candidate will allow more of their family members to come to New York and partake in the city's vast array of free services, which are not really free because they're paid for by Americans who actually have jobs. Now, they don't care, not even for a second, that New York City will ultimately collapse as a result of this. In their eyes, the worst case scenario is that New York will eventually resemble a country like Kenya, a place they've already, they're familiar with. They're from there. That's their baseline. And they're not afraid of it. And besides, they have no tie to New York or to the country. They don't care about it. They don't love New York. They don't love America. They just got here. So if that city falls apart, they can just move somewhere else. And when that new place is drained of all of its resources and it collapses, well, they can just move on again. And so on and so on and so on. Ask the people voting for these candidates in any state that held elections last night, and they will admit all of this. I'm not speculating. They'll tell you this. Just ask them. So consider this interview that aired on CNN yesterday featuring a woman from Kenya named Mariam Jaradi. Now, this woman doesn't say that she supports Abigail Spanberger in Virginia because she likes her position on corporate tax rates or something. Instead, she supports Abigail Spanberger because Abigail Spanberger, is going to allow more foreigners from Kenya to enter the country. That's it. Watch.
I always vote since I became a citizen, and that was 20 years ago. And I migrated from Kenya originally. My family is back home in Kenya, and how I see how things are going on, like with families being separated. As a human being, as a mother, separating families, especially children, from their mothers or fathers, I don't believe in that. So that made me come out and also come and vote.
So this woman has apparently lived in America for nearly 2 decades. She's still fixated on immigration as her top issue. She still refers to Kenya as her home. She's voting based on the best interests of Kenyans. You know, that's all there is to it. I mean, it really is as simple as that. Do you think she cares in any way about the fact that Abigail Spanberger embraced Jay Jones after he joked about murdering the children of conservative politicians? A joke that, was actually not really a joke. You think she cares about that at all? You think she spent even 1 second thinking about that? Do you think she'd flinch if Spanberger herself had literally murdered the child of a conservative politician? Of course not. I mean, the object of this woman and anyone like her is to advance their own national and ethnic interests. They don't pause to consider your interests. They don't care about you. They don't care about your country. They live here, but they don't care about it. Together with liberal women, foreigners now constitute the bulk of the Democrat Party's voting base. And this is a voting bloc that's extraordinarily potent and destructive. It's immune to any kind of, negotiation. The foreigners are voting based on their own national and ethnic interests. And the liberal women are voting based on, largely appeals to emotion and vibes. They're basically getting their entire political philosophy from those yard signs that say, no person is illegal. And one of those voters just spoke to Fox. Listen.
I think what's really important and standing out for me right now is if we can take ourselves like a high level, like not say immigration, not say economy, not say all the hot talking points, and just ask ourselves, how are we treating our neighbors? Like, how are we treating one another? And is it okay that yesterday, on Saturday, 42 million of our neighbors no longer can feed themselves? Is it okay that our neighbors are getting taken off the streets by ICE? Is it okay that gender-affirming care is being taken from young people who really need it to survive? Is it okay that the Supreme Court has now justified racial profiling? That's not how I want to treat my neighbor.
Now, New York has been in a state of decline for many, many years. John Rocker's infamous interview with Sports Illustrated, where he railed against all the foreigners making the city impossible to live in, was more than 25 years ago. But until recently, liberal women didn't have enough votes to sway elections based on vapid, DNC-issued talking points and bumper sticker slogans. But what's changed is that in 2025, yet another reliably Democrat demographic has moved into New York. As of the most recent estimates from the mayor's office, 1 in 5 New Yorkers can't even speak the English language. More than 60% of children in New York live in a household with at least one foreign-born family member. Roughly 40% of New Yorkers were not born in this country. Half of all New Yorkers speak a language other than English at home. And these are all conservative estimates, by the way. New York, as I've said before, is not an American city anymore. Nearly 50% of the population of Queens was not born in this country. Watch.
I think Queens is so interesting, Sean. You look at this, just for our viewers at home. Like, no matter where you're watching in America tonight, just stop and think about this for a moment. This is one of 5 boroughs, okay, in Queens. It's not even the most populated. In this particular borough, maybe you fly in the JFK, maybe you fly in the LaGuardia, population 2.4 million. Foreign born, 48%. Languages spoken in Queens alone, 160 different languages. When you study New York City, you're studying a country. Sean, you can literally cross the street and you find people with different ethnicity, different religion. They come from different parts of the world, and they certainly vote in very different ways. And you do not have to go far in that neighborhood or on that street to find that. I just saying, very interesting to study.
Now, these numbers represent a drastic shift in more ways than one. And don't listen to anyone who tries to tell you, oh, it's always been this way. New York has always had a significant immigrant population. It's been this way for many generations. Well, yes, but not all immigration is the same. You know, these immigrants are now coming from very different parts of the world compared to where they were coming from 100 years ago. You know, this chart prepared by VDARE demonstrates this, as you can see here. And according to the U.S. Census, New York was 98% white in 1910. 98%. 90% in 1950. 77% white in 1970. Then it dropped to 52% in 1980. 44% by 1990. By 2020, it was down to 32%. So from almost everybody is white to a small minority, 32% in the span of about 100 years. Now, that is a demographic transformation that's inevitably going to result in massive cultural changes, and those changes have not been positive. That's just a fact. So anyone who says, oh, you're doing identity politics, even conservatives, well, this is identity politics. We need to be past this. Oh, shut up. This is just the reality. It's a thing that's happening. Okay? We got to talk about the things that are happening in the country. Grand Canyon University, an affordable private Christian university based in beautiful, beautiful Phoenix, Arizona, is one of the largest universities in the country. Praised for its culture of community and impact, GCU integrates the free market system, a welcoming Christian worldview, and free and open discourse into 369 academic programs with over 300 online. Join a nationwide community of learners redefining online education through GCU's 100% online MBA degree program. Learn ethical entrepreneurship and scale your business to serve your community. In addition to federal grants and aid, GCU's online students received nearly $161 million in institutional scholarships in 2024. Find your purpose at Grand Canyon University, private, Christian, affordable. Visit gcu.edu/myoffer to see the scholarships that you may qualify for. Zohran Mamdani's talking about it during his victory speech last night. Zohran Mamdani made all this very explicit. Watch.
We will prove that there is no problem too large for government to solve and no concern too small for it to care about.
We will prove that there is no problem too large for the government to solve and no concern too small for it to care about. Well, it's hard to think of a more un-American and delusional statement than that, right? You want to talk about cultural shifts. It is hard to think of a less American idea than that. There is no problem too small or too large for the government to solve. Imagine hearing a line like that and applauding without any hint of irony. Imagine taking a look at the employees of your local DMV and thinking to yourself, you know what? This is great. I'd love to put these people in charge of every single aspect of my life, no matter how insignificant it may be. I'd love to have slack-jawed government bureaucrats resolve every dispute I'll ever have with anyone. I'd love to have government bureaucrats tell me when I'm allowed to go to the grocery store. I'd love to have them run the grocery store and tell me when I'm allowed to go and what I can buy there. Please, DMV lady, fix all my problems. I see you sitting there and I think to myself, you are the person who could solve all my problems. Please fix them. I put all of my trust in you. Has there ever been a serious person in the history of this country who has genuinely believed that the government could solve literally every problem, both big and small, as Mamdani just promised explicitly? Well, the answer is no, of course. But Mamdani was not elected by serious people. At least he was not elected by Americans. No American has ever felt that way. You know, in that speech, Mamdani is invoking basically the inverse of Ronald Reagan's famous line, which is that, you know, the 9 most terrifying words in the English language are, I'm from the government, I'm here to help. That's a very well-trod line. It's a funny line. At the time, it was a funny line because everybody immediately understood what Reagan was getting at. Well, now we have a third world communist, unironically, playing the role of the guy from the government uttering the 9 most terrifying words, except he's now playing to a crowd that finds those words comforting rather than terrifying. Well, there's a reason for that. Again, think about who his voters are. Liberal women and foreigners. That's basically it. I mean, that's pretty much the whole thing. Well, liberal women desperately desire to be taken care of. They want the government to come in and provide for them and hug them closely and whisper reassuring words. These women have rejected the natural female impulse ingrained over millennia to go out and find a man who can do those things for them. But the impulse remains. And now they look to satisfy it with the government. They are, you know, strong, independent women who don't need no man. Instead, they need a vast, faceless, incompetent bureaucracy to solve all their problems instead. And as for the foreigners, well, many of them are from the third world where the government does control everything or tries to, and where no alternative is really imaginable, right? Where things like civil liberties, like nobody talks about that. It's just doesn't come up. Reagan's joke isn't a joke anymore. People from many third world countries who are now living in the U.S. really believe it. And during his speech, Mamdani made sure to mention many of those third world countries by name. Watch.
I speak of Yemeni bodega owners and Mexican abuelas, Senegalese taxi drivers and Uzbek nurses, Trinidadian line cooks and Ethiopian aunties. Yes, aunties.
Well, you know, he goes through the whole list, and you notice he doesn't mention Americans. That's the one group that doesn't even make the list because he doesn't care about them. New York is not an American city anymore, and he's not playing to that crowd at all. Even the liberal white women didn't get a mention there. But I'm sure it's just an oversight. I'm sure it's not an indication that Democrats are embracing ethnic nationalism for every racial group except white people because, you know, they openly despise white people. That would just be ridiculous. And even if they are, we don't want to talk about it or point it out because then we're playing identity politics. And you wouldn't want to do that. So, you know, that means that you just have to, when the left does this blatant anti-white routine, that's just the polite thing is just to not say anything about it. And if you do, you're just as bad as they are. This is what I'm told anyway. But, you know, as dire as the races in New York and Virginia were, it needs to be said that the problem for the GOP is much bigger than these two states. Republican incumbents lost in both races in Georgia for public service commissioner for the first time in more than 2 decades. The Supreme Court races in Pennsylvania We're not encouraging for Democrats either, with Democrats, or for Republicans rather, with Democrats overwhelmingly retaining all of their seats there. Put simply, last night was a rout for the conservative movement and for Americans more broadly. And no other way to say it. You know, we're no longer talking about hypotheticals anymore. We're not discussing polls. The enemies of this country have just seized a great deal of power. Now, it doesn't mean we're doomed, right? It doesn't mean all is lost. I know there are plenty of people say, well, don't listen to the doomsayers. It's not such a big deal. Yeah, it's not doom, but it is a serious situation. I don't know what to tell you. And don't listen to anyone claiming otherwise. An Islamic third world communist taking over our largest and most important city, that's a big deal. It is. As much as you might not want it to be, it is. And many people will die as a result. Many people's lives will become much worse and people will die. Make no mistake about it. Our economy will suffer in ways that we can't even begin to comprehend. That's the other point for people who say, well, it's New York. Like, let New York fall into, let it collapse into rubble. That's New York's problem. Well, I can't really go along with that. Like, I can't get myself to not care because that is our city, or it's supposed to be. It's not an American city anymore, but it should be. And also, again, this is the nerve center of our economy. But you have to understand that if New York collapses, that has an impact on everybody. That's not the kind of thing where you can just say, oh, yeah, I live 100 miles away. Has no effect on me. I don't care if you live 2,000 miles away. This stuff matters. It affects all of our lives. And the rule of law will continue to erode as even more violent criminals are unleashed on the public. All of that will happen. I'm not fear-mongering. I'm just giving you the facts. So what are we going to do about it? Well, I'll tell you what we need to do. And I'm sorry for being really simplistic here, but we need to win. Okay, winning, it's not the only thing that matters, but it is the first thing that matters. If you don't win, then all the other stuff that matters doesn't matter. You have to win. And right now, a lot of people are kind of drawing lines on the right, putting some of us on that side, some of us on this side. These lines are drawn. I get put on all different sides, depending on who's talking, which is a lot of fun. But here's the line that we really need. Okay, if I'm going to draw a line, here's where I'm drawing it. Conservatives who have actually shown an ability to win and move the needle culturally and politically on one side, versus conservatives who have never contributed meaningfully to any victory at all. Like, that's the line that I care about right now. And the folks in the latter group, the losers, they're really loud, especially loud now, but it's always been unclear, like, why we should ever listen to anything they say. Anytime any conservative with a platform goes out and says, this is what we should do, you should ask them. You should say, okay, well, show me your scoreboard. What have you won? Like, what, have you contributed at all to any win at all? Have you succeeded in advancing the conservative cause in any form at all ever? Show me that. And if you haven't, then it's like, well, I don't care what you say. You don't know what you're talking about. It's not, this nothing personal. But it's the way it is. And after last night's elections, it's clear that we should just not listen to those people ever again. And again, it's nothing personal. It's not a cheap shot or anything like that. I'm not disavowing them or canceling anyone. I don't want to expel anyone from the movement at all. They're still conservatives. I even like some of them. Some of our lovable losers who are constantly running their mouths but have never done anything. I even like some of them. All I'm saying is that when it comes to figuring out how to win, which again is always the first and most urgent priority, they don't have much to offer. They don't know how to win. We've got a lot of people who are talking a lot and saying a lot, but they don't know how to win. They've never done it and never will. They don't have the stomach for it. They don't have the heart or the mind for it. They're too squeamish. They're too weak. They're too desirous of approval from polite society. And so last night, a fractured right was demolished by a unified left, a coalition of leftists, primarily college-educated women and foreigners, all of whom are happy to dance on the graves of dead conservatives. These are people who heard Jay Jones wishing death on us and our children and then flocked to the polls to make him the top law enforcement officer of the state. You know, they didn't subject Jones to any purity test. They didn't denounce and disavow him out of principle. They ignored the complaints from conservatives. They ignored complaints from people like me. Right? And they just went out and won. They heard us demanding that they disavow Jones, and again, I'm one of them, say, you should disavow him. What he said was terrible. And we were right? What he said was terrible. But the Democrats, they looked at us and said, what? Disavow what, and lose on purpose? Throw the race? Like, he's our guy. You want us to just, give up, not win? You want us to just lose on purpose? Because what he said was bad? No, they looked at us and they just laughed at us. And they said, I'm not going to do that. No, we're going to win. They didn't even think about it. Let me tell you something. On the left, not only did they not disavow Jay Jones, there was no conversation about it. It wasn't even a debate. Right? It wasn't even like what would happen with conservatives where you spend 7 weeks just torturing ourselves over it. It was not even a conversation. It's like, well, of course we're not going to. We have to win that race. I mean, we're not going to disavow him and let a Republican take the ball. No, they just said, we're going to go out and win. That's it. Because you got to win. And that's what happened. And they won. So I will repeat the call that made so many people angry at me. And you can be angry at me all you want. I don't really care. In my view, the right must unite against the people who want us dead. We just have to. Our lives are at stake. Our children's futures are at stake. Our nation itself is at stake. They are destroying the country. Like, we are losing the country. We are losing it right now. Yeah, and if the more control they have, they will open up the floodgates even more, and we will just lose it. We won't have a country anymore. So this is not the time for infighting and ankle biting. I'm not saying that there will never be a time necessarily. I'm saying that the time is not now. Even if you can make an argument that, well, we got to have this fight. Well, the time was not these last few weeks in the run-up to the election. Like, even if I could buy your argument that, this is a fight we have to have, we had to have it now? We had to have it right when the election is happening? This was the time to do it? Really? No. You got to be smart. You got to be strategic. And if you can't see that now, then I don't know what else to say. We have just been handed a wake-up call, the biggest wake-up call in the recent history of the conservative movement. We should pay attention. We should accelerate mass deportations. We should suspend all migration from the third world, along with all federal assistance to New York and Virginia. As I outlined earlier this week, we should kick every single foreign national off of federal financial assistance completely, effective immediately, which would also have the effect of then you'd have mass self-deportations happening. Because if they can't be here and live off of the taxpayer, then they're not going to want to be here anymore. That's what conservatives need to accomplish if we want to continue existing as a viable political movement. If we want to exist as a country. We don't have to agree with each other. We don't even have to like each other. But we do have to recognize that our greatest threat, the greatest threat to civilization itself, just demolished our candidates last night. These people putting foreign communists in charge of our city, the people lining up to vote for candidates who openly want to murder you, who want to watch your children die in your arms and have said so. That is the greatest threat by far. And it's not even close. What the now sitting Attorney General of Virginia said is worse than anything any conservative has ever said. I mean, that alone. I want to watch the children of my enemies die in their arms. Can you find me a conservative, someone on the right who said anything like that? I want to watch their children die in their arms? I'm not aware of even go to the fringiest fringe you can find. I've never even seen anything like that. And yet the guy that said that on the left is not fringe. He is now the chief law enforcement officer of Virginia. So you try to make your moral equivalencies all you want. I don't see an equivalence. They want to destroy us. And if we don't return the favor, and soon, then none of our disagreements will matter. The foreigners who just voted for Zohran Mamdani and Abigail Spanberger and Omar Fateh, they don't care about the internal squabbling on the right. Neither should we. If we want to have any success in the midterms 1 year from now, staying on message, staying focused, staying disciplined, being unified, this above all else is what will win. And if there's any good news from last night, it's that everybody on the right, everyone who's paying even the slightest bit of attention, must now realize that. Thanks for checking out this video. If you'd like to listen to my full podcast on the go, you can check out The Matt Walsh Show on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts.